I'm Don.
And hi, I'm Cindy. Welcome to Pearls of Liberty, February 9th, 2013, and may we possibly be the first to wish you Happy Chinese New Year. And in the Chinese astrology, hopefully this doesn't offend too many people, this is the year of the snake. This new year is the year of the snake. And some people feel like that portends bad things, and a Christian friend of ours told us some of the negative things that have happened in years that were the year of the snake. But we want to consider a positive aspect of snakes that Jesus mentioned, and that is that snakes are wise. So we want to just hover over the thought of being wise as serpents.
Right, that doesn't mean you act like a serpent. That means you know what the enemy's plans are, and you don't live in la-la land and tell yourself that Jesus will protect you and you don't need to worry about what the enemy is doing, because Jesus didn't say that for nothing. He said that so that we would consider that a part of our training, to know what the enemy's plans are. And this coming year, I think we can look at as an opportunity to trample on the snake, the woman. The snake bites the woman's heels. The woman, the bride, crushes the head of the serpent. So that could happen this year. Hey, this is the year of the serpent. Why not? I see that as a good way to use this to our advantage. Now, that is not meant in any way to be anti-Chinese. The Chinese people are not the serpent. This is a representation of, in many ways, evil, but also, since all creatures are under the dominion of God, there are attributes that we can utilize. And as being what we are, man, who is in charge of the creatures. So don't hide from them, and listen to all of God's intelligence that will enable us to rout the enemy. We are victorious.
And we wanted to just bring up a few ways in which we feel like Christians have not been wise as serpents. There's this tendency that we've observed and we've even experienced and participated in ourselves that Christians have toward hearing something that another Christian says, and especially if the person has a reputation or is in leadership, and embracing that idea as if it's gospel. And some of the most deceptive, defeating messages or beliefs that Christians hold today have started as just this little seed of an idea that somebody had that was maybe really not founded in Scripture, just popped into their head. Possibly people have intentionally misled Christians by giving us little tidbits of information that aren't quite true. And we just want to focus on this, and just hopefully these things will become conscious thoughts, and we take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ.
Absolutely. A big part of that is your view of how you think things will play out, or, as to use the Christian term, eschatology, what your view of the end times is. And as events rapidly unfold, we begin to see something that looks like a biblical end time scenario. We may not be there fully yet, but as events accelerate, we appear to be getting closer to something that looks like the prophecies in the book of Revelation, etc. So there's two things you can do with that. You can say, oh great, this whole sad thing is coming to an end, and I get to be raptured out. Now, don't have time to go into it now, but that's actually an example of what Cindy was just talking about. The whole escapist rapture mentality is not something that's biblical. It's something that's extra biblical, and it's been superimposed and is a very new teaching in terms of the church history timeline. It's only in the last 150 years that doctrine came out, and it's not based in Scripture. So I challenge you to search that out and find the truth yourself. The truth is that the bride of Christ in the last days is an overcoming warrior bride who is able to stand against all the wiles of the enemy. And that's a view of the end times that will lead you into the correct stance and being able to see truth for what it is and see lies and expose them, etc.
Sure, and there are other examples. One we probably won't get into unless Don feels really inspired is the modern day idea of Zionism, which drives much of the war machine in these current times. And another one that we just learned of from a friend, I guess there's this new idea among Christians that the Revolutionary War around 1776 and the War of 1812 were not justified because of the teachings in the New Testament that a slave shouldn't seek to leave his master. So that just seems like really convoluted thinking and not something that I can even really fully make sense in my head.
Yeah, there's people that really believe that because the kings claim to own the earth, that means that all people are their servants and that we can't leave that. Hey, whatever happened to the idea of no king but King Jesus? That is actually a biblical idea, that these people that are saying, no, we need to be slaves because we shouldn't try to be free. It's so crazy. It's impossible to take it seriously. But the Scripture has to be balanced against other Scripture, and the obvious one that comes to mind, I just read this morning, is Galatians 5, and the intro to that is where God is saying, don't be yoked to a bond of slavery. That, cast that off. Don't have anything to do with any rule-keeping system, any system that says that you've got to do this in order to please God, because you're negating Christ's victory and you're coming into bondage all over again. So don't do it. So I see every opportunity to advance in personal responsibility and individual liberty as being stepping into what Christ died for. And if I fail to do that, I'm not taking seriously his sacrifice for me. And that's, in my belief, that's what I'm going to be judged for. I'm going to be judged for, did I fully appropriate as much as possible the gospel, the finished work of Christ to my life here on earth? Did I walk in the victory that was given to me, that is my birthright? So it's about advancing in liberty that Christ died for. And if more and more humans do that and treat each other with love, well, hey, then we'll have less of a need for oppressive government, that's for sure. Oppressive government is really a sentence on the disobedience of man. It doesn't mean that we deserve that. It means that we have to remember again what we've lost and behold again what we've lost sight of. And that's where America is right now. We need to look at that vision of liberty, and I'm not saying that all the founders were Christians, far from it, but they had a vision that I believe is completely in line with God's vision for us, which is what Christ died for, each individual's liberty and right of self-determination.
Don't be misled. Be wise as serpents, and just be aware that at different times, doctrine has been intentionally crafted at high levels of the church to intentionally deceive and mislead people. And the Rockefeller Foundation has funded a lot of seminaries, and we've been over most of that in the past, but it's something to always keep in mind and develop your own relationship with the Lord. Read the Bible. Know what God historically thinks about things, how he's responded to things, how he's treated people, what he's required, and just get a feel for who he is, spend time in prayer and worship, and know him, so that when some of these deceptive ideas come forth, even from a position of authority, you'll be able to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ.
Yeah, I think we can even go so far as to say that during this year of the snake, we may see, I think undoubtedly will see, an increase in the deception of the enemy. Yet more and more people are waking up and seeing through it, yet more and more people are under a spell, so to speak. It's just becoming more and more obvious that either people are seeing through it or they're being deceived by it, and that will only intensify in the coming year, I believe.
Another idea that we want to give a little time to today is PTSD and the struggles that veterans and even active duty soldiers have, U.S. military. On the Daily Paul, there was recently an article, PTSD is not a disorder, and the article was stating the idea that PTSD is not, there's nothing wrong with you if you experience PTSD. More, there's something wrong with you if you don't, because it's a response to a situation that really we're not wired to handle. And in dealing with PTSD, the suggestion is that people who are experiencing PTSD consider what they've done, what's been done to them, and go through a process of forgiveness and letting all that go, because it's a natural response to being in an unnatural circumstance.
Right. Humans were not wired to kill one another, and you have to have a justification for that in most cases, in current situations especially, doesn't hold up. So you've got young men and women that become soldiers in order to fight for something that they believe is right. They've dedicated their lives to a noble cause and put their lives on the line. And yet when they find themselves in that life and death situation, or in a situation where they're told to follow orders and perhaps even kill civilians and women and children, etc., that doesn't match up with their original commitment. So there's this huge conflict going on inside, and the PTSD scenario is where you've got the inability to reconcile that conflict. So you've got to deal with it. They have to. These are things that have to be dealt with, and it's a normal response. So I'm saying, yes, we agree with the article on the Daily Paul, that it's not a disorder, it's a natural response, but yet I'm saying my advice would be, if you have family members that are experiencing this or potentially could, I wouldn't go the route of drugs, because that's going to actually mask the problem and make it worse. In fact, we even know of a person who was helped by his neighbors, a vet, to get on some serotonin reuptake inhibitor class drugs that bottle up the emotions and mask the problem, and then explosion, and there was a death of a husband of our friend. That can happen, and drugs are not the answer because they mask the problem. The answer is really dealing with the conflict between the initial vision and the actual response, and the conscience that has been violated in that process, and that needs to happen. It's there's so many good young men and women that are committing suicide that aren't able, in the armed forces, that aren't able to process these things. We all need to become more aware of the struggle and help people in whatever way we can, with a listening ear, and just helping people to process this extreme conflict that's going on inside.
And the ideal solution is that the war machine in the U.S. just has the switch turned to the off position. We just stop these wars of conquest and nation building.
Now, some people would say the first step to that is what's already happening, and goodness gracious, we're turning in our weapons, and then the world's going to be a wonderful place. Isn't that the same thing? Now, if you're anti-war, that means that you must be against the Second Amendment and people having guns, right?
Well, you know, I have a special idea this week that relates to one of the news articles that we wanted to mention. The paper, two ladies in Southern California were out on their paper route. They had a pickup truck of the sort that the police were looking for, but it was a different color. But the police opened fire on these ladies, and I believe, if memory serves, we have the link in our notes, in our comment section on YouTube, or details section. If memory serves, they fired 40 rounds into this truck. So my idea for peace in this country, specifically in our borders, is that the police turn in their weapons and all the households are armed.
Yeah. Yeah, that would work. We take individual responsibility for our own safety. It's all about that, and not trusting the state. It's really, really so simple. We take personal responsibility for us. I own me, you own you, and your stuff. And we take responsibility for protecting that, should there be thieves, etc. And we don't abdicate that responsibility and say, oh, call 911. Come on, give me a break. That's never going to be fast enough. So, yeah, you need to process through some real rational thought on this thing, and not just go to the route that says, short circuit, guns are bad, get rid of guns, hey, everything is going to be okay. No, not. All that does is disarm the law-abiding people and make the problem worse. So, put your brains in gear and realize that this is serious stuff we're dealing with, but it's also life-changing stuff. We're at a crossroads in our culture and in the world, where we're going to either go down a road of status slavery, obedience to a tyrannical government that takes away the power of the individual, or we are going to become more free and autonomous and loving and respecting of one another. It could go either way.
I vote for free and autonomous and loving and respecting of one another.
Yeah, you win.
We've heard this before, and not much came of it. But there is information, and we have the link, that there are going to be Obama impeachment proceedings in March.
Right, I just saw a little article about this. It seems serious. I have no trouble believing that a scenario like this would happen, because I believe that where there are people at high levels, but not the very highest levels, but high enough levels in military that see the abuse of power that's going on, the unlawful, unconstitutional deployment of our troops, and they have said, hey, we've got to do something about this, but we can't directly, because we're the military itself that's under the commander-in-chief. So how do we deal with this? I think that the Congress has been brought in, there's been people in Congress, there's still a few good ones, that have been told some of the whole story. And if this article is correct, impeachment proceedings will be starting in March that have to do with the abuses of power in Libya and in Syria, and also having to do with Obama's role in Fast and Furious. So there's some serious stuff that's going to start happening. I'd say it's about time, but it's got to be done right. And it sounds like, if I'm reading between the lines here correctly, that the process is being handled correctly so far.
Hopefully, yes. Hopefully we can have some resolution to some of these issues and begin to have our republic restored. The 15th will be this week, and there is an asteroid called DA14 that is supposed to pass within 17,200 miles of the Earth, which is inside the orbit of some satellite, so it's pretty close. And an asteroid this size fell in Russia in 1908 and exploded so that 820 square miles of trees were knocked down. So pray, focus your 40 Tesla units, and we'll all focus our 40 Tesla units and just pray mostly that NASA's right and that the asteroid does not strike the Earth.
Yes, absolutely. And for this week, I'll sign off saying, see the world the way that it really is. See yourself in it. Walk your walk. You are the one that you've been waiting for.